Hello everyone. This is Jacqui dialing in with our webinar today, which is about personal alignment and congruency. And in the context of NLP, what I'm going to be focusing on today is identity and getting a deeper understanding of who you are and how you're moving through the world, helping you understand yourself better. So I'll be presenting this webinar today, and I've had, I guess, extensive experience with NLP and various other areas as well, but I've been using NLP for over 20 years in my life personally and professionally as well, in my career as a coach, as an executive, working with people in human resources, business development, and various other areas as well. So today's webinar, as I said, is about identity and discovering and understanding more about identity and who we are and how we operate. Just a few logistical points. If you're dialing in, you should be able to hear me. Everybody is on mute, and there's a chat box down the bottom there. If you wanted to ask some questions, I'll be happy to address those as we go, and certainly if we have time at the end as well. Today's webinar will go for about 30 to 40 minutes, thereabouts, and I really hope you enjoy the contact details at the end for you as well if you want to get in touch and ask anything about this or anything else, and maybe some of the programs that I'm running as well. So understanding what is NLP, and so NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. The neuro part is about our nervous system. Linguistics is about the language that we use and how we express ourselves in the world, both verbally and non-verbally. And programming can be understood to mean, programming comes from the computer area of computer programming, but in NLP, in the context of the discipline, it's more about the patterns and the psychology and the strategies that we use. For example, you might have a particular strategy for how you brush your teeth, how you get out of bed in the morning, how you get yourself to work, and so on. So in essence, NLP really is about a process for understanding how our mind creates our reality, how the language of our mind creates and affects the patterns that we use in daily life. So looking at identity, and so some definitions are in order at this point because there's so much out there in psychology about different areas of psychology, different models and so on, and about what is the self and what personality is, what our identity actually means. So here's a couple of definitions to help us, I guess, get on the same page and understand so that we're all talking about the same thing. So the first one really is about self-concept and what that is, and that's our own perception about ourself, what we know about ourselves, and it could be positive, it could be negative, realistic or unrealistic. They're attributes and traits that we have as a person. So I might say I have brown eyes, I have black hair, I have, I'm 5'5", although my partner and myself disagree on that a little bit every now and then. He thinks I'm a little bit shorter. And the other one is self-esteem. And self-esteem really is our evaluation of our own worth as a person based on our self-perception. And that can be positive and negative as well. And whereas self-concept is really a straight-out description of what you know about yourself, self-esteem is more about how you feel about yourself. And then the last one there is identity, which is our overall sense of who we are and how we fit into society, how we fit into our communities, and how we move through the world. So, for example, a self-concept statement might be something like, I have brown eyes. A self-esteem comment might be something like, I hate my brown eyes. And an identity comment or description might be, I'm African, or I'm a woman, or something where we say I am and I identify with that. So it might be an ability, it might be a capability. Anyway, we're going going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Now, it's identity and identification is a real interesting concept, because to a certain extent it helps us gives us a sense of stability and security when we understand what our identity is and how we fit into society and so on. The process of identification is a normal process that everybody engages in from basically when you're born and when you're growing up. You start identifying, for example, with your parents or with loved ones, with people around you, or even sometimes with things that help us reflect back to us who we are and how we are. And so we take on, we assimilate aspects of ourselves by modelling other people around us. And that's really how our personality is made up and sort of specified in that way. We'll be talking more about these things as we go, and there's certainly a lot on the internet about it as well, and you can contact me if you want more information. So understanding who you are, what makes up our understanding of who we are? That we have a sense of self-identity, we have a sense of boundaries, we have a model of the world, how we decide to move through the world, and our sense of self-esteem as well. So all these in combination help us really understand who we are and how we want to move through it. So if I was to ask you that question, who are you? How would you answer that question? I'd like you to just keep those thoughts in mind as we go further along in this presentation. So who are you? Who are you? And I think I would really suggest having a pen and paper handy nearby, so you might jot down some thoughts as we go as well. In actual fact, having a look at this presentation a few times might also help you develop a deeper understanding. So identity, what do we identify with? Sometimes we identify with things like personal attributes. They could, you could be saying a personal attribute might be something like I'm tall, I'm short, I'm gentle, I'm a strong person, I'm fun, or I'm creative. Any type of personal attribute sometimes we identify with. In language terms, when you're listening to someone's language and how they actually articulate it, the identity statement usually comes in the form of I am. So it will be I am X, or I am happy, I am sad, I am strong, I am gentle, I am creative. So normally when you hear the words I am, that should raise a little flag for you in terms of this is how that person or that individual sees themselves. So skills and abilities are another way that a person might identify themselves. It could be like I'm an artist, or I'm a baker, I'm a builder, and so on. Occupation often is a real interesting one, you would have heard that, I'm sure, from a lot of people that you might meet, as you go around the traps. I'm a doctor, I'm a coach, I'm a lawyer, I am a mother, I am a father, I am a daughter, and so on. So, although mother is not really an occupation in some respects, but it is. It's a very, very important occupation. But when we're talking about professional occupations, it could be anything from a builder, a carpenter, an electrician, I'm a plumber, and so on. So people will identify with their occupation. We ask them, who are you? They will say, oh, I'm a doctor, for example. Physical attributes is another one that we identify with. I'm young, or I'm old, or I'm strong, and so on, anything to do with our physical makeup as well. So as I said before, identification is a normal psychological process. The issue with identification, or the issue in terms of when it becomes a challenge, is when we over-identify or overvalue a particular identity to the exclusion of everything else, every other aspect of what makes us up and who we are. And this is a real critical thing to get a handle on, to really understand, is that when you over-identify with something, you actually limit yourself. You almost box yourself into a confined space. So, for example, one of the things that I identify personally with is being a mother, and I really love being a mother. I think that's one of the critical, most beautiful things that I've ever done in my life is actually being a mother. But there was one point in my life where that's all I saw myself as, being a mother, and then wanting to become a businesswoman was almost in conflict with that, because being a mother was such a strong identity for me, and I was identifying with that. So I did some things to sort of expand my perceptions of who I am as a person, and who I am as Jacqui. And being a mother was only and still is only one aspect of myself, a very important aspect of who I am and how I move through the world, but only one perspective or one aspect. So being able to see ourselves as more than what we perceive as a single identity is really important, to be able to be flexible, to provide choice in our lives, to enrich our lives so that I can experience so much more in my life by being a mother, but by being other things as well, or whatever I choose to be. And that choice is mine. I have a friend of mine, for example, she's now 36 years old, and who I shall not name to protect the innocent, but she's got a really interesting story about identification. And she's about 36 years old now, and she was dancing since she was 3 years old. Dance was a passion for her. It was her life. It was how she moved through the world. And she basically lived and breathed dancing, and then she really came alive when she danced, and she became a performer, a very successful performer as well. And then when in her late 20s, she actually was involved in a car accident, and consequently she was no longer able to perform professionally. And I don't know, you can probably imagine, after having lived and breathed it, she was devastated. She got depressed, her health suffered, she became anxious, she didn't exercise as much anymore. It's like she didn't care about anything. She really lost her own sense of, I guess, her own personal sense of purpose. She didn't know what to really do with herself anymore, and she felt really lost. Anyway, so she, I guess, went through a process of internal change and transition, and really expanded her concept of her own self, and who she was, and how she chose to move through the world. And she then decided to, and this was over a period of a few years where she was recuperating and so on, and looking at what else, who am I, what does this mean in my life, that I can no longer dance professionally and I can no longer perform. And then she moved to a different space, and she became a teacher. And now she shares and inspires others with her joy and passion for movement, and connecting, how she describes it, connecting to the spirit, or manifesting the spirit in the world through movement and through dance. But to get to that space, she says to me, she tells me the story of really changing her own sense of who she was, and how she wanted to move through the role. So you might know, personally, it might be something that has happened to you or someone you know, when people invest, for example, a lot of time and energy in a particular profession. It could be becoming a lawyer, it could be becoming a doctor, or a builder, or any of those things. And then they, for whatever reason, are no longer able to perform that role. They might have had enough of that area and wanting to change to something different, and then going through a space of being really totally confused about what it is they can do, who they are, and what it means in their life. And they might feel trapped, for example, in a particular area. Other people, another example might be a senior manager who spends their entire career in a firm, and then at some point their position is made redundant, and there's a real deep sense of loss and confusion. maybe even some anger and probably a lot of fear as well about, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how to do anything else. So again, it's the I, it's the identity. And in many respects, we forget that we are much more than what we do, and how, and there are ways of actually expanding that perception of what we do. I think at this point it'd be really nice for you to just take a moment and jot down a couple of those things that you identify with. And there might be some which are pretty resourceful, and there might be some things you identify with that aren't so resourceful or supporting of how you want to move through the world. So just take a moment and jot those things down. So the other area we wanted to talk a little bit about is, so we spoke a little bit about identity. We'll just have a quick chat about about these other three boundaries: model the world and self-esteem. So in terms of boundaries are sort of, I guess, invisible fences or invisible circles we hold around ourselves about things like preferences or rules about how we move through the world, about how you move through the world, about things that you like. They're about behaviours that you'll accept from self and others towards yourself. And sometimes we talk about having permeable boundaries or having strong boundaries. And it's interesting talking about an abstract concept in sort of in sort of a more practical way. But for example, here we're talking about the ability to say yes or no to events or statements. Somebody with strong boundaries, when they say yes to something, then they're totally congruent with that yes. Yes, I will perform at tonight's presentation, and they're fully congruent, fully aligned with that yes, and are totally committed and will very likely show up and perform. A person with boundaries that are maybe weak, when they say yes to things, they have, it's almost like an inability to say no. They say yes to everything, so no matter what anybody asks them to do, they will say, yep, I will do the presentation, and by the way, I will also do the dishes tonight and look after the kids and make dinner and finalise that report for tomorrow morning and everything else. So the boundaries around yes and no are really interesting. So they say yes to everything, very, very much so. They probably could be afraid of saying no because they might think that the other person might reject them if they say no, that the person won't like them or won't appreciate them. So a lot of their sense of self-worth depends on the other person liking them or not. So they say yes to everything, and with the hope that the other will like and value and appreciate them. And then on the other side, the person who says no to everything, whenever you ask them to do something, they say no. And on that other end of the continuum, saying no to everything could be that a person is afraid to get involved or afraid to participate, so they have some doubt and insecurity about agendas. It could be a lot of reasons why they say no to being part of life, maybe. The whole idea of behaviours that you accept from self and others, that's a real interesting thing. And an example of that could be when a person, and I'm not saying that this is you, but there are some people out there who have very highly self-critical voices in their head that say sometimes really nasty things to themselves about, you're not good enough, you're stupid, and so on. and think that that's okay, you know, to have a real high, a very strong self-critical voice. But then when they talk to other people, they're really nice with others. And so the thing being that they don't think that that type of behaviour is appropriate towards others, but they think it's okay for themselves. And I'm just wondering if that's the case for you. Do you have a critical internal inner dialogue going on, and is that okay? Are you finding that okay for you? So there's just a little quote down there. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. That's from a song by the Indigo Girls, and that really reflects a lot of truth in there. So boundaries are really important in understanding who you are. What are your boundaries like? How would you say? Are they strong? Are they, or are they weak boundaries? So the other aspect of understanding the self is looking at our own model of the world, and meaning our personal maps of how we view the world, how we structure our understanding of the world to help us organise what we do and how we operate. And our maps that we form, and you can have a look at some of the other webinars where I talked a little bit about how maps are formed, how we form our internal map of the world. Are our maps reflective? Are they impoverished maps? Are they rich maps? Are they detail maps? Are our maps useful? Do they help us achieve what we want? Do they guide us to the right place when we follow them or not? So having a map of the world, and basically a lot of our map also is formed, in youth, being influenced by parents and the people around us, and then our friends and the community we're moving as well. All of that influences the development of our model of the world, and having a model of the world which is, I guess, rich. The richer the better, to help us find those treasures that we actually want in our lives. So how useful do you feel is your model or your view of the world? Is it providing you everything that you need? NLP provides us with a lot of tools and techniques to be able to change our model of the world, to create what we want to have, help us achieve our objectives, and a lot more. The third component of understanding who you are is our sense of self-esteem, and that's an evaluation of our self-worth and our belonging and how we feel about ourselves. Self-esteem and, feeling worthless is an area of limiting, I guess, one of the main areas where people limit themselves, where they might have beliefs about themselves, where they really, really limit and restrict what they are able to do and achieve in their lives. And it could be about, not deserving to have wealth, not deserving to have health, abundance, not deserving to have that good relationship or even that promotion that you really want. There's a sense there of people feeling like, I don't belong. There's something here that's I don't belong here, or I'm a fake. A sense that there's something fundamentally wrong with me as a person, and what I do deserve is a lot of the pain and the suffering that I put myself through, that I go through. So the self-esteem can be really an overall evaluation. It can be based on positive or negative self-perceptions. My question to you is, how do you generally feel about yourself? How do you feel about yourself? I love this one down here, this little sticker, I love myself. I think that's really, really critically important.